Hello there, my name is Jason Schmaltz and I'm an AMGA single pitch instructor, and today I'm going to show you a couple tips for when you are climbing, especially in a multi-pitch setting, with a climber or a climbing partner that may have a big discrepancy in weight between you and them. For me, I'm a larger climber, and so a lot of my peers that I climb with are significantly lighter than me. So it's good for me to know some tips and tricks for how to make some situations a little bit safer, especially when coming right off a belay. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So the first setup I'm going to show you is probably the most basic for setting up what's called a fixed point belay, which I'll elaborate more on once I have it set up. But basically, as I approach the bolts on a pitch, I want to set up a little bit of a modification to the normal single Masterpoint. So I take my 120 centimeter sling and I clip in normally with the tab end on this one. So I make one discrepancy from normal practice, which I don't clip in directly. Instead, I pass the sling through and bring it back down to where I'm going to tie the Masterpoint. And then I will do just the standard overhand Masterpoint like that. And so what you can see I have now is I have one independent loop with just a single strand, and then another independent loop with two strands. And then my Masterpoint has 3 strands. And then I'll go ahead and clove hitch into that like normal. Okay, lock down. And then I would bring my my partner up like normal on a gree-gree, okay? Let's assume that my partner comes up to the station, which will be signified by this figure of 8. That will be them. So they'll come up and we will get them cloved in as well. Right here. Also on the Masterpoint. Oops. Okay. So they're all set to go. I'll lock them in. And now, so all that up to this point was kind of standard practice, except for making this double strand here. And the reason we did that is because as we belay my partner off to the next pitch, I'm actually going to put their belay on this double strand instead of on my person like I normally would, which is a gree-gree. And the reason for that is assuming you want to do this like kind of a special case. One of two cases: either they can take a large lead fall right off the belay, so if there's no protection or potential for a big fall with no friction, meaning like an overhang or something like that, we want to isolate that fall from us as the belayer and put it on this, put it on the anchor. Another situation is that they're just a heavier climber, a significantly heavier climber than us. So if they take a lead fall, I won't get, as the lighter belayer, won't get sucked up into this belay station or into these anchors. So I will take a locking HMS carabiner and clip both strands of the double-stranded side of the Masterpoint. I'll take the back side of their clove hitch. So the way I do the munter is I take the brake side, which will not be the side going to their clove, and I put it on the carabiner in the back, and then I come to the back and bring it to the front, and there's my munter, okay, and lock down, okay. And so now they can, while I hold that, they can come off clove, okay, and now they're ready to start climbing, okay. And as they start climbing, I can pay out slack like this, okay. So as they're climbing, the rope will be up, and if they do not get something clipped in and they have a fall, the fall will go like this, okay. So you can see it has a hard fall. This double strand was loaded significantly, but you saw there wasn't any impact to my part of the Masterpoint. Okay, so that's the advantage of this fixed point belay, is I'm belaying on this fixed point of the Masterpoint, or of the anchor setup, I should say, and instead of on me. Okay. Now the other case is if they're climbing along and they do get clipped in. So as they're climbing, I'm going to continue to feed out slack, and this J will be created, and then they'll take up slack as they climb, and I'll feed out more. And then if they take a lead fall from above and the piece holds, but they're heavy, the munter will be sucked up like that, okay? And I could actually get sucked up some, but will ultimately be limited by how much I'm pulled up by the anchors, okay? So this is really a good application when you're just on bolts. And I'm also not sucked into the anchors, right? It's just the Masterpoint, and the whole anchor system is pulled up until it basically inverts, okay? So that's the advantage of that system is that I, as the belayer, am never sucked into the anchors themselves and potentially getting hurt. Okay. The main disadvantage of this system is that my climber is not on an assisted braking device. So no gree-gree, no ATC guide mode, nothing like that. It's just on a munter. Okay, and there's also not a lot of friction in this munter as compared to some of those other devices. So if they take a fall, it stands to be a good threat that I may lose my grip on the rope. So one thing to mitigate that is you never want to execute this system without gloves on. Okay, so be sure that you're wearing gloves if you're doing this. The other disadvantage of this system, especially if the climber is going to take a fall without having a piece in at first, so in this case, where they're just pulled straight down, or where they fall straight down, is there's no shock absorption on that type of fall. Normally, if I was connected to a gree-gree to the climber, there would be maybe a alpine draw or quick draw right here that I would absorb some of that shock for them. So that's kind of a disadvantage of the fixed point, or two disadvantages of the fixed point belay system. And let me show you what may be a better alternative to this that may take a little bit more time, but offers some more, offers more advantages and has less disadvantages. Okay, a second system that you can use instead of the fixed point belay for dealing with a heavier climber would be to approach the bolts for the top of a pitch. Just build a standard Masterpoint setup. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but instead of coming up and cloving, come up and tie a munter like that, and then belay yourself back down a ways until you can get to a decent stance, and then go ahead and clove the back end of that munter, or the belay strand of that munter, to your belay loop. And now I have a closed loop. Okay, and now I can go ahead and take this closed loop, bring it forward, do a BHK. Oops. Okay, so I have my BHK Masterpoint now, and I can belay my climber up, or my follower up on that with my gree-gree. So go ahead and pull this till we get to that's me. Okay, so this is the climber right here, and they are coming up to us. Okay, and once they get to us, they can go ahead and clove in here off this Masterpoint. Make sure to do the Mickey Mouse ears when someone is on the gree-gree. Okay, now I can take the gree-gree off. And put it on me. Then I take the back side of their clove because they're ready to climb onto my belt. and they can come off clove. Normally I wouldn't be taking my hands off the gree-gree, but I'm acting like two people right now. And they're ready to proceed. Now, here's the advantage of this system is I can go ahead, they can go ahead and climb up and attach to, they can clip to one of these anchors. And so my goal as the belayer is to go ahead and minimize my distance from that first clip in. So I can go ahead and untie this Masterpoint, this BHK, it's not needed anymore. And I can back up. And it's okay to back up because I still have my loop closed with the clove hitch. And then I can belay them from here. And you can see I have a significant amount of distance between myself and their first clip, which is on a bolt. So it should be a really good it should be really good at withstanding any kind of load. So if they do fall, so here's all the advantages now, right? Is I have all this distance, so if they do fall, I can absorb the shock by coming forward. I can come forward quite a bit before I get pulled into the anchors. And so that's kind of the advantages. Now we're back to normal lead climbing, and I've mitigated the concern as a light belayer of getting pulled into the anchors. There are other things you can do to kind of help mitigate it even more by building ground anchors and things like that. But then you start to introduce more of a shock load. So I want to try to absorb the fall. Once my climber, or once my lead climber gets up to the top of the next pitch, I can come off gree-gree as they're pulling the rope up. Okay, once my partner's gotten to the top of the next pitch and they're ready to pull rope, they can pull until they get to this clove hitch basically. I can say that's me. I can say climbing. And if needed, I may not need to do this, but if needed, I can pull myself up to this anchor system, okay? And they can pull the remainder of the rope up before I get ready to untie this clove. Now, if I'm nervous about the exposure or something like that, I can connect to this Masterpoint still as I undo this clove, because there is about 6 feet of slack in this system. So I can undo this clove, okay? I can still feed them the rest of the rope through the munter and keep myself on belay basically at the Masterpoint. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this if it's a huge ledge or something like that, but this is an option. And then once they've sucked up the rope to this point, I can go ahead and come off and take down the Masterpoint. Hey, I hope you found the information useful for 2 different options for setting up a belay for dealing with a partner that might be a little bit bigger than you. Hey, if you have any comments, suggestions, I know there's a lot of degrees of freedom in this type of setup. I just tried to show you 2 of the most common options. So I'm sure people have different ways of setting it up. But I found this useful for me personally because I'm so big compared to a lot of my fellow climbers, and I hope you are able to use it when you're out there climbing. Hey, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you out at the crack.